Hello, everybody. My name is Rich. We've got Aaron here and Lily, and this is yet another recording of our podcast in its early stages. So glad you could join us and are watching our recording. The topic for today is around success. How do we all measure success? What does success mean to each of us, and how does that change over the course of our lives and the stage of our lives? And so I know for me, my success or my measure of success has definitely evolved over time, and it's become, I think, much more simple and much less materialistic than it may have been in my younger days. So I'm interested to see what Aaron and Lily have to say.
Hey everyone, welcome to XYZ Storytellers, a platform started by three people across generations X, Y, and Z, engaging in conversations in the spirit of increased empathy and understanding.
Hi, I'm Erin, the millennial traveler and author. I'm an empath with a drive for connecting to others. I enjoy singing in the car, eating pints of ice cream, and hanging out with my cat, Gimbal.
Hey, I'm Rich, the graybeard Gen Xer with 30 years in conference rooms or airplanes around the globe. I've also been a Little League coach and a family bus driver. This podcast is a way for me to have the types of conversations that just don't happen enough in my day-to-day life.
And me, I'm Lily. I've always been very opinionated and I speak passionately about things no matter who I might be with at the time. I'm here to share my thoughts and get the perspectives of two other generations so I can grow and expand my understanding of the world around me.
With XYZ Storytellers, our conversations aren't meant to be political, social, or even related to current events. We are just recording authentic conversations on a variety of topics, hoping they will resonate in some small way. Thanks for listening. It's kind of interesting because when I think about my definition of success, it's certainly shifted over the years. So when I was in middle school and high school, it was, what are my grades? What's my GPA? What are my extracurriculars? What does my resume look like? Because I was measuring that based on what I wanted to do with my life next. And for a couple of years in between then, I also worked really hard to make a lot of money and put it in my savings. And ultimately, I ended up using that savings on travel. I would go through these cycles of working my butt off, getting a ton of money in my savings, and then spending it all on a plane ticket. And it worked for me because I was doing exciting things and going to really cool places and meeting exciting people. And so for me, that definition of success was, what's my grade point average and how much money is in my bank account, not so that I could buy things, but so that I could buy experiences. Thinking about my definition of success now is really different for me because I'm 24. I am on week 4, I think, of being self-employed. And it's been interesting for me to kind of watch this shift over the last couple of weeks as I figure out that it's not necessarily the finances that are going to make me feel successful, but it's waking up every day and doing something that I'm passionate about and not feeling like I'm tied to a 9-to-5. And so financially, I am not at all successful yet, if that is your definition of success, is to have a lot of money. But in my life, I feel incredibly successful because I'm doing what I'm most passionate about. And so I think it depends on what your goal is. If your goal is to buy experiences, then success might look like a loaded bank account. If your goal is to just live a life and do what you're passionate about, then it might not look like a hefty bank account, but it might look like getting up every day and forging ahead with whatever your mission is for that week. So it's been interesting to kind of see it shift as I'm in different points of my life, because there is no grade point average in real life. I can't measure my success by that, both fortunately and unfortunately. So it depends on who you ask, but for me, I think my success as of right now in this moment is, can I afford to pursue my passions in a way that is meaningful for me and purposeful for others?
Okay. All right. No, that's a great opening sharing. So, Lily, what do you think? When you hear the word success, or you see people talking about it, or when you're thinking about your own success, what are your thoughts?
I think I'm in the stage that Erin was just talking about, where I'm thinking about my grades, my grade point average, and what my rank in my class is, and what assignments I have to get done, and just like school in general is my idea of success right now because I am 16. But I think it will shift when I get older because school won't always be my focus in life, and I will eventually graduate whether it be high school or college, I will eventually move on and get a job. So I think my idea of success right now is just being my best student self that I can be.
So let me ask the question a slightly different way. So that, it's, I think you hit on something very interesting, both of you, about the idea that even, for someone who's 16 or for someone who's as old as 24, our own definition of success shifts depending on where we're at and what we're thinking about. But also too, though, I'm wondering, when you see people that are further on in life or more established, or you know what do you look for in people, or what are the traits or attributes or external, because you can only see what you can see, right? You can't get inside someone's head, you can't get inside someone's own psyche and their own perception of their success. But when you look at someone else, and what is it that makes you think, hey, that's a pretty successful person, and I hope I could be that successful in that way? You know what I'm saying? So, what are your thoughts around that as to how you look at other people? And it's not a judging, it's just a acknowledgement of other people's success.
I think it's been humbling for me to look at other people's successful setups or entrepreneurial startups. And I think about the people who I consider to kind of be my idols, or not an end goal in the way that I want to be exactly like them, but I love what they're doing and I love how they're doing it. So, for example, Brene Brown has been a huge influence for me since college, when her TED Talk first became popular and nationally known. And since, I've kind of been able to watch her build her mission. And so I like to align myself very closely with that. But I think what's interesting is that lately I've been looking at her and going, how can I be that? And I need to step back and go, no, she's doing her own thing. My thing is going to be very different. So it's measuring less tangible aspects. So rather than looking at how many followers she has on Twitter or how many books she has out, I need to look at what her influence is and how much of an impact she's making in the space around her. And that's really, because my goal is to not have what she has. It's to do and influence as she's able to, and maybe not necessarily in the same direction. I'm not going to go out and try to preach about vulnerability if I don't understand vulnerability research. But in terms of having that power behind what she does. And I think too often startups focus on the numbers and how much money are they making, how many followers do they have, how many posts are they doing a week, and Right. It needs to be less about that and more of the impact. But when we come from a society where we grow up, and Lily, I'm sure you can speak to this, where we grow up comparing ourselves to other people's grade point averages, we look for those numbers. What ranking are you on the soccer team? Are you the captain? Are you benched? Are you a 4.0? Are you 4.5? Are you 2.5? I mean, we start at a very young age evaluating ourselves against others with numbers and in categories. So it makes sense that we try to do that in adulthood, but it's not something that works, I guess.
Okay. I'm going to put a pin in that, and I'm going to see what Lily has to say, because I have a thought about what you said, but I don't want to jump on it right yet. Lily?
When I see other people, it's more adults whenever I think of, are they successful or not? Because when I look at other students, I'm not really thinking, oh, are they a successful student? Are they doing their best? What's their GPA? Like, I don't really think about other people when I think of students, but when I look at adults, I don't think of money and like how much money are they making. I think of like, do they have what they want to do figured out, to not to a T, but like to where they have a path to where they want to go to end up. So when I think of successful, I think of, oh, do they have ideas of what they want to do? Do they have a job lined up? Do they have people in the industry of what they want to do that they're talking to? Basically, like, do they have any idea of what they want to do when they're older? Like, because Right. I don't really have a set idea. I just have an occupation. So when I think of successfulness, I think of a path, basically.
Okay. So in your mind, Lily, what you're saying is that people that your sense is that they're on a path towards something purposeful, whatever that is for them, that you feel like that's that's a person who's, if not already successful, is on their way to being successful because they've found their path. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because I feel like a lot of people are still struggling to find what they want to do, and that's not a problem. Like, I'm not saying they're any less successful. I'm just saying if you have a path of what you want to do and you're following it and you're taking steps to get to your end goal, that's already successful, I feel like, because you're eventually going to get there. So
Well, so, for me, and again, some of this, you get more philosophical as you get more gray in your hair, and you mentioned Brene Brown. So, and the whole idea of metrics, how many followers and all that. The reality is that Brene Brown doesn't get where she is until she gets a following that tilts the scale to a point where some of the momentum starts to feed on itself. So she had to focus on what drove the lever to a point, and then you reach, I think, a point of critical mass where it's like, okay, I've crested this hill. Now I just can be myself even more fully and authentically, and I'm going to, and things are just going to go where they go. And so I think that there is an element of you need to understand what measures and what makes things work, if that's the space you want to go.
But the other problem is, if I'm doing that, then I also have to consider, okay, at what age did she start, and at what age am I trying to start? And look at, there's a certain aspect to that, though, right? Because as far as experience goes, I can really only say I've had 2 years of experience, and Brene Brown has been researching this practically her entire life. So there's a point also where I need to be able to tip the scales in my own world and go, it's not impossible for me to reach that level of success at this age, but I shouldn't be hard on myself because I'm not there yet.
No, I mean, I don't know how you can be. I mean, when I tell people that we're doing this podcast, and I talk about who's involved in Generation X, Y, and Z, right? And I tell people that, how we met, Aaron, and you've published a book at 24. I mean, that still leaves me, very impressed and somewhat in awe that a 24-year-old is able to just decide, I'm going to publish a book, and you took it to where you took it, and you're on a path where you're now able to just, you've decided to become self-employed. And so I don't think, to me, what I'm learning is success is not a target, and success is not even crossing a hurdle or a measure in time. Success is a state of being, right? And so in many ways, my favorite expression when I talk to people that I coach or that I just know and enjoy talking to about people, they struggle with depression or they struggle with their own, like to Lily's point, they're not quite sure where they want to be, right? They haven't quite figured it out. Not that anybody has it figured out, but they at least don't feel like they've got a path or a direction to point. And the expression I use is, you are right where you're supposed to be. No matter what your situation is in life, you are a sum total of all of your experiences. You're a sum total of all of your strengths, weaknesses, successes, failures of specific events or whatever. And, Brene Brown is right where she is supposed to be at this moment in time, right? Aaron O'Neill is right where you are supposed to be. So in that regard, how can any of us be anything but successful, right? The fact that we're here in this moment and efforting forward means you're successful by definition. And so, I think you're doing yourself a disservice when you start doing math and comparing yourself to Brene Brown, because you are anything but Brene Brown. And that's the beauty of it all, right? Lily is anything but me. I mean, she's not me and she'll never be me. And I don't ever want her to think that she needs to try and be anything close to me. We all just need to be ourselves, right? It's a matter of how much do you spend trying to compare yourself to some artificial measure you have in your own head. Because for me, success is so fleeting, because I could look at you, Aaron, and see a success. you could look at yourself and go, I'm failing miserably this week. Well, that's kind of an arbitrary thing to say, right? Both for me to say you're successful and for you to say you're failing. It's that neither one of us is an authority on either. So, when I looked through this article that I found, that it talked about 19 definitions of success, I'm going to read a couple of these statements out there and see what they prompt for each of you to comment. Success is always doing your best. Success is believing you can. Success is knowing your life is filled with abundance, is loving and being loved back, is not giving up, is celebrating small victories. And I'll just make one comment before I ask each of you to give me your thoughts on some of these. To me, what's beautiful about those statements is they're past tense, present tense, future tense, all at the same time. It's not about how do I compare to yesterday's scorecard. It's not how do I compare to tomorrow's goals. It's how am I efforting through my day, right? And I'll make one closing thought before I turn it over. There's a lot of people in my age group. You start to find out on Facebook how many people struggle with depression, anxiety, or whatever the case might be. And I think it's more prolific in our society today than it's ever been. But I have a sentence that I use with people, and I say, every sunrise is a victory. Every sunrise is success. The fact that you were able to get yourself to tomorrow, or this morning, or whatever the case might be, that's a victory. And there's nothing but potential in the day. And I know we're sounding really philosophic, but what I'm starting to learn as I get through this process myself, it's in here. Success is in here and in the heart of my own view and my own internal dialogue than it has anything to do with what anybody else can either put upon me or what I can look to other people from an external validation or to some other checklist, right? So I'll stop there. Lily, what do you think about some of those thoughts? Because it's kind of some deep stuff and maybe you don't think about it in those terms, but how do you react to that kind of a commentary?
When you said like success is all in your head, I don't know how to explain it. Like success is very personal, I feel like, because people could look at you, like how you're talking to Aaron, like people can look at you and think you are the most successful person they've ever met in their entire lives, and you could feel like you are not doing anything worthy of like even like talking about. So I just think as long as you are happy with what you're doing and you feel like you've at least accomplished something for that day, or maybe even not, because sometimes you don't have to. I just feel like you're successful in your own way, because if you try and put yourself into someone else's standards and you try and be successful how you think they think successfulness is, then you're not going to ever accomplish like what you want to. I don't know how to explain it without sounding like a quote, like a deep little quote.
But that doesn't sound too pie in the sky or touchy-feely for you at 16. I mean, I know there's a lot of reality in getting GPAs and scores, and I mean, you've got to be able to do things to get to certain places to learn or whatever. But how do you reconcile that with what we were just talking about? Because it seems like really very different things. So one's not necessarily a success. One might be a roadmap.
Because even though right now my life is all very like numbers and statistics and top 5% of your class, like I don't necessarily in my like whole being like think that my only way of being successful is being the top of my class. That's just my standards right now because of where I am. But say right now I was like Aaron's age and I had my own job and I was out of college and I had like my own life outside of school. I wouldn't think that being successful is being employee of the month like every month. I would think it was, am I where I want to be if not now, like, will I be in the future if I keep doing what I'm doing right now? Because if not, then I wouldn't consider myself successful if I'm not doing what I want to do eventually.
I have a question for you, Lily. So what do you think that your GPA is measuring? Like, if you were to tell me why it's important for you to have a 4.0, what would it be?
I don't think a lot of people put too much self-worth on their GPAs, and like they are really hard on themselves. And I think it's important, don't get me wrong, but I don't think that you should put your whole self-worth on, do you have a 4.0 GPA? Because
Is it measuring how much you know, or is it measuring how well you learn?
It's how well you learn. I will always think that, because some people, they're probably the smartest and most intelligent people I've ever talked to in school. Like, we'll just be talking in class and I'm like, wow, you're really smart. And then they'll fail a test and I'm like, well, how does that add up? It's because they're not good at studying and preparing themselves for standardized tests that are in school, but that doesn't mean they're not smart. I just think the whole grade system and like GPAs and rank, that's all based on how well you take tests.
Well, I think that's such a valuable thing for you to know now, because one of my mentors told me back when we first started talking, he's like, school is not about teaching you the knowledge that's in the textbooks. It's teaching you how to be resourceful and how to learn and how to navigate the real world in terms of finding what you need to know. And I had never thought about my education in that way. I thought it was about, all right, I've checked off these boxes because I know about this event at this date, and but really, in all reality, my education was teaching me how to be resourceful and how to find information and process and reflect on that. And I think that that's so much more valuable to young adults than it is knowing certain information. One, because in the age of technology, we can Google just about anything and get the answer anytime. So rote memorization doesn't really matter. But also, that definition of success kind of streams from, am I able to find the answer? It's not necessarily about what grade I got, but did I learn something from it? And another thing that one of my mentors said was, and it's a quote, and I can't remember who said it originally, but it's essentially, success is failing over and over and over again without losing your enthusiasm. And that's kind of what I try to tell myself every day, is if I am still enthusiastic about what I'm doing, then I'm not failing. I'm only failing if I completely flop out and I just don't care and I don't try again. Because in reality, if you are successful, you are striving for something that is so much greater than any failure or setback could stop you from doing. And so I think that that's it kind of in a long streamlined, mushy way. It takes you from focusing on GPA as the information that you know versus looking at it as a way to learn, and taking that and turning it into, well, success is still success even if I'm failing, because I'm learning something from it and I'm still pushing forward.
So to that point, Aaron, I want to ask you a quick math question. So how long was it that you were in China, that you traveled from the time that you landed to the time that you flew home, which is the sum total of your experience in China, which you said yourself is one of the most transformative experiences you've had, right?
Yes, absolutely.
How many days was that?
Well, it was 6 months. Oh, geez. You know what's bad is that I even write, I have it in my book of how many days it was exactly to the T.
So let's
couldn't tell you off the top of my head.
Let's take 180 days. If you were to take a quiz every morning of those 180 days, and the only question on that quiz was, on a scale of 0 to 100, how do you think you're doing in this moment? And you had a lot of highs and lows, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would your GPA have been? Would you have scored 100 on every one of those daily quizzes?
Well, if the answer was 10, definitely no.
Right. So your average would have been somewhere over those 180 quizzes. You probably would have averaged some, maybe you had as low as a 3 or a 5, and some you had some 10s, but you probably maybe averaged in around a 70%. Is that a fair?
Maybe even 60, to be honest. I mean, I didn't start traveling
You
until...
make my point easier then.
Yeah, I didn't start traveling until halfway through, so I spent 3 months pretty miserable.
Okay.
So I would even be willing to say 40 to 50% was 10s.
Okay, so
'Cause- yeah.
so let's say you averaged a 65, which is a low C or a high D, right? On those daily quizzes. Do you think that that experience and what you learned and what you grew was a low C, high D experience?
No.
Exactly. Exactly. So the school system model of regular measurement is flawed by definition. And to your point, what 6 months in your life did you learn more than you ever learned about yourself and your resourcefulness and everything else? It was those 6 months probably.
Mm-hmm.
So when you think about success, if you take the Western mentality, if you will, and the formal education mentality of what success is with regular measures, you don't get a realistic view. But you know what? So I've hired hundreds of people over the years, and I've also worked with hundreds of others that have been first, second, and third year consultants, auditors, people, and talked to a lot of people that came up through college and whatnot. And what I tell people is if you want to be successful, you need to learn how to learn. And if you learn how to learn, there's nothing that you're not going to be able to achieve if you've got determination or grit or whatever the case might be. But also, part of learning is how to learn from mistakes. Now, the inside joke in our family is one of my daughters, we used to say to all my kids, hey, you got to learn from your mistakes. Every parent says that, right? So one of my daughters, she's had some challenges, and one day she said, but Dad, you told me. And I'm learning by making mistakes. And I'm like, hold on a second. Learn from your mistakes. Don't make mistakes as a methodology to learn. That's not necessarily the right way to interpret that paradigm. But when you think about these 19 success factors, always doing your best. I mean, what else can you do? And that's where I'm learning too. The best way to be successful is to be present in everything you do. And I'm sure, Aaron, with all that you've got, and Lily, you're probably learning this too, because in the past you've had challenges, and I don't want to betray any confidences, but I think it's fair to say you've had challenges where you've stressed about school and you were worried about that next test, or you were upset about that last test, right? And Aaron, you've got a lot going on with the changing of your jobs, and I've struggled with this, and I'm 53 years old, and it's something I still have to teach and catch myself on. The less time we spend worrying about what's going to happen or ruminating on what has happened, and the more time we spend in every moment, the better chance we have of moving things in a direction that we want and succeeding. So how does being present resonate with either of you when it comes to success? If you can get through a day and you realize, wow, this was an awesome day. I never thought about tomorrow. I didn't really dwell on yesterday. I just was in the moment.
It's funny. I recently went to a storytelling event, and we were given a prompt that was to tell a random story. We had to come up with it on the spot. And my story ended up being about how my brain is like Diner Dash, if you've ever played that game. And I attribute it to playing Diner Dash a lot growing up. I loved those time management, multitasking games that really engaged me in thinking about what was coming next. And I told this story about how I was trying to shower after the gym, and I had one shoe off, and I was leaning to put my towel on a hook, and I had one pant leg out because I was doing 3 different things at once, even though all I was doing was getting undressed for a shower. It was such a simple task, and yet I made it so complex because I tried to make it hyper efficient and actually set myself back. And it was a really strange moment. Yeah, seriously. I'm glad the floor wasn't wet. But I live my life in this Diner Dash mentality. And last week I had a day where I was at Starbucks and I was working on 12 different things at once. I was jumping tasks. And for some reason, that works for me. I find that I'm most productive if when I'm doing a task and I think, oh, I need to do this, if I go do it right then, it gets done, I set it aside and I go back to what I was doing, and it's fine. Now, if I were to break myself into two and have one person be present in everything and one person be diner dash mentality, I don't know, maybe the success rates or the accomplishments of the day would be different. But I've accepted that part of my brain is stimulated by this constant source of information. And I, for some reason, thrive most when there's a great balance of that. It's not necessarily I'm only on one task and that's all I'm doing. And it's not I'm trying to cook dinner and write a book and take care of my cat. There's a certain level of multitasking that my brain allows.
Don't confuse being present with single threading yourself, right? You can multitask in the moment. If your cat needs to be fed right now, you need to go check the mail right now, and then you need to also do this right now. To the extent that you can multitask those things, but those are all things that need to be dealt with now. But you're not looking at those three things and then going, oh my God, and I've got to do this tomorrow, and I'm really worried about that next week, and I'm still upset about what happened yesterday when I was in that meeting and it didn't go well. That's not being in the moment. So don't.
I do that too, though.
but that's the difference, right? Being in the moment and being present and multitasking aren't necessarily mutually exclusive, right?
That's fair.
When you start to get stressed, you start to get your heart rate up, and when you start to get inefficient is when you're trying to multitask in the moment and dwell on the future and process the past. That's when things start to go a little bit sideways. So Lily, what do you have to say about that?
I'm a little bit of both. I don't ever catch myself thinking about the past and being like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have done that, or that was really embarrassing, like that really sucks that I did that. I don't really think about the past. I don't see the point in it because it already happened. You can't go back. But I do stress out about the future a lot. Like if I'm not doing a task for something that day, I'm thinking about something I have to do the next day or the next week or something that's due, or like even like just like my life in general, like what I'm gonna do whenever I'm older. I just get very stressed out very easily because I don't know how to like pace myself. I either do things all at once or I just wait, or I just like don't do them at all. So I have all these assignments that I have to do, or I have all these ideas that I have to do, and like things that I have to do for other people or things I have to do for class or for myself. And I get so overwhelmed that I just end up doing them all at once, or I just not do them at all.
So I know, and trust me, I think Aaron and I have been there, and that's not necessarily going to go away from any wisdom we share with you on this recording today. And it's going to be something that you're going to be dealing with and learning from. But I guess the only message I could tell you is everybody deals with those same things, and so you're further behind the curve in that you struggle with that. But I think I want to bring it back to success and talking about what does it mean to be successful, and what does success mean to each of us. And so I'm going to kind of give my closing thoughts a little bit, and then see what each of you want to share about your thoughts as we kind of wrap up the topic. So, success as you end up having had 5 kids and having raised 4.5 of them. Lily's still got a little bit more to go before she's fully baked. You start to think in terms of like legacy, right? You start thinking in terms of who have I impacted? And I'm going to share a couple of anecdotes, and I don't know if I shared this with you, Aaron, at one previous conversation or not, and I don't know if I've shared it with Lily, but I used to think success was all about promotions and pay raises and titles and all those things. And it took me a lot of years, and partly because those things drove financial security, and financial security made me a better provider, and being a better provider provided a level of comfort and a level of freedom for my family that maybe, I didn't always think I was going to be able to provide. And so, but I was mistaking that for success, when the reality is these things enabled me to think about and look at things and contemplate success at a different level. Some people's success is I kept my family alive, right? Some people's success based on their own situation is we never were homeless, right? So everyone's success, both what they really feel their potential is and what their own path is, but even just at a socioeconomic level or anything else, everyone's success is their own to define. And I can't put my definition of success against anybody else and say, you're not successful because you don't meet my measures. So I think that's one thing I want to take away. But the story I want to tell is let's see, would have been in 2005. So I would have been 16 years into my career. And I thought I was fairly successful. And then I also was on the edge of failing because of a job change that blew up in my face, which we'll talk about another day. But I thought I was doing okay. And then as part of that, when I was supervising some people, some single moms were on my team, and there were a couple of very talented people that had never gone to college. And they, and I don't know, Aaron, I don't know if I told you, but Lily, some emotion may come up here, but you'll have to bear with me because it's just something that's going to stick with me till I'm 85. But these single moms had been through some traumatic experiences, that are inherent in just becoming a single mom. They had a lot of self-doubt. Maybe they didn't have the mentoring and the role models that they could have had, but they found themselves working in a role that required a lot of intelligence and a lot of ability to learn and succeed. And they were some of my top performers. But they weren't going to achieve a level of security if they didn't get their college degree. It's just flat out reality of the world we live in. So I would regularly push them and say, you need to go to college. You need to go back to school. And they just wouldn't. They're like, I'm not ready. I haven't been in a class. And I would nudge and push, and I would use opportunities, anything I had where they did something good for work or they were recognized. I would say, see, look, I'm telling you, just go to one class. As it turns out, before I left that company, they both ended up taking some night classes and starting back into education. And I went on my way, and they did their thing, and we hadn't talked. And you have Facebook and LinkedIn, and I don't know exactly how they reached back out, but both of them within a period of 2 or 3 months of each other had achieved their degree. They'd attained their degree. And they both reached back out to me and they said, I just felt like I needed to thank you. I needed to thank you because if it hadn't been for you and your encouragement, I would not have gone back to school. And if I had not gone back to school, I would not have my degree, and I would not feel like I can provide for my family the way that I can. So I want to tell you that I got my degree, and you were a big part of me starting that journey. And my response was, you did all the work. Maybe I gave you the nudge. But then as I completed the message and told them they did all the work, which they knew, I didn't necessarily write their papers for them. But those are a couple of the proudest moments that I've had outside of raising my own kids. And so for me, to your point about Brene Brown is going to help hundreds of thousands of people, and it's going to be done publicly. If I know that I helped 2 single moms get their degree and be able to provide for their family and get a level of confidence and security that they were then able to move into healthy relationships, and you know what I mean, all of that, I'm a success already. And anything else I do is just gravy when it comes to materialistic type security or financial security, whatever the case might be. And it's just 2 people. So when Aaron, that story popped into my head when you mentioned about where am I, what was Brene, you're already impacting lives. And if you've impacted just one, and if you're totally honest with yourself, I'm sure you already know you've had an impact on one life in the last 3 years.
I've always told myself that if I can use my elevator speech, even in college, was if I can use my skill sets to change one person's perspective, then that is a success for me. And it was what I was telling myself when I was writing this book. It's like, even if this gets one purchase and it opens one person's mind and they find the story fascinating or interesting or inspiring, even if it just puts a smile on their face because they thought I write comically and casually enough that it's entertaining, then
I do
that's
like your
a
writing
success
style,
for
by
me.
the way.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
But I will tell you, it's only the only reason I know that even happened is these people reached back out to me.
Mhm.
And I'd like to think, and there's nothing wrong with me thinking this, I may have had impacts on more than that. They just haven't reached back out and told me about it. But then that kind of goes back to the random acts of kindness that we had the last podcast. Do I need to know for it to be an act of kindness? Do I need to know for it to be an indication of my success and impact on the world? No. Right? So you, as an author, you may never know. You may feel very comfortable it's one and that might be enough, but I'm quite certain it's more. You know? And so when it comes to measuring your success, stop the measuring part and just live in the moment like we talked about. Lily, how about you? Does anything we've talked about really kind of resonated or changed your thoughts or?
I think it's only like enforced what I've already been thinking, because before we started talking about it, I didn't really know what my idea of success was. Like, I didn't have a set idea of it because I am in school, and I think it would have been very different from your idea of success because of where I am. But once I started thinking about it and you guys started giving your own opinions, I realized that I think success is just as long as you believe that you have done something worth your time and you haven't wasted any of your time and you think you've done something and you've accomplished what you want to, I think that's success. Like, if you in your own mind are happy and you have your own path and you are going to end up there someday, anytime in the future, then you're successful.
Mm-hmm. It's in the eye of the beholder, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the danger we all have is that we all discount our own thoughts.
Yeah.
And the idea of giving ourselves credit or even just inside our own heads with nobody else knowing, patting ourselves on the back, it feels like a selfish act. And that's a shame. I mean, that's a shame that in our society that we're conditioned to not feel like we can just say to ourselves. And, you know, it reminds me of a article that was written about, for all the material success we have in the world, and this was before all the nonsense of the last 5 years. This article was about 10 years ago. For all the measures of success and improvement, you know, medical advancements and socioeconomic gains and all those things, that as a society we are unhappy. In this article, when it was written, saying we're unhappier now than we've ever been at any time in our history, and that happiness is something that people still struggle to attain. And somebody wanted to find out, and there's an entire institute, the Happiness Institute or something, there's someone out there, the science of happiness and what happiness really is. And one of the things they did early on was a survey, and they went around all around the world, and they went to, and you know, Aaron, this is part of the thing that I got from your book and your experience. There's people out there that you ask them if they're happy or not, they don't know how to answer the question. Because they spend zero time wondering if they're happy or unhappy. They're just living their life. You know, and so it's kind of like, I want to achieve balance in my life. And very, very few people in an Eastern culture that tell you never quite get there. Very few people achieve balance in their life. And you know why? Because as soon as they think they're balanced, by definition, they're out of balance. Because they've come outside of themselves and took that step back and went, I've achieved balance by just that recognition alone. So when you think about happiness, when you step outside of yourself, am I happy, am I not happy? You've completely invalidated the exercise. And I think success is the same thing. As soon as you remove yourself from the present moment, whether that's almost killing yourself trying to do 6 things getting into the shower, or whether it's you know, getting caught up in all the social aspects of being a high school student alongside with researching for college and trying to keep your parents happy. When you're in that moment and you're living it, it can be stressful. Successful doesn't mean stress-free. But as soon as you take that step back and you kind of go, I'm going to measure myself, I think you've knocked yourself out of that mode. I think the people that are the most successful are the people that think about success the least. People that are most happy are the people that think about happiness the least, because they're in that moment.
Well, I think lately I've been noticing that my sleep is not steady. I wake up pretty much every hour on the hour. It's ridiculous. Okay. And part of the reason that I started to kind of reflect on why I felt like I couldn't sleep is because I didn't feel like I had accomplished enough in the day. I felt like I could have done more, or I should have done more, or maybe I wasted too much time watching Netflix or eating my dinner or something. And in the self-employed world, which is a whole other topic in of itself, it's very difficult to create that structure for yourself because you work when you're most inspired. At least that's how I allow myself to do that. And so actually sitting next to me is my done list. And I started making this list of maybe not things that were on my to-do list, but every time I accomplished something, even if it's just I stretched today, I wrote it down so that when I go to bed, if I need a reminder of, look at all the things that I've done today, it might not have been on my list, it might not have been top priority, but I accomplished it, then hopefully my brain will start to understand that, yes, it's not exactly what I pictured my day would be like, but I still did a lot with my time, and that's still something to be appreciated and valued. And so I think that my biggest takeaway of how I'm defining success is I need to look at the things that I accomplished, maybe not the things that I wanted to, but the things that I did and the people that will impact.
And I think that's great. I think the done list, I love it. I think, though, that I will challenge you to remember that what we just did with that 180 daily quizzes, right? You can use the done list as a way to kind of be a positive reinforcement. They say whenever you make a to-do list, write things you've already done as the first 3 things. So once you get done with your to-do list, the first thing you can do is cross the first things off, and you feel like you're already making progress. And it's a mental trick, but it works. Think about those daily quizzes. There's going to be days in that 180 days where you failed miserably. But if you look back at that experience holistically, you're like, I wouldn't trade a minute for what I did, and I couldn't be prouder of what I accomplished. Let that perspective help you at some times when you're struggling to stay asleep. You're on a very powerful journey right now. This weekend, you're going to Chicago, or next week, you're going to Chicago, and you're gonna speak or be a part of 2 different presentations. Yeah, do you have 3 days of downtime? But you have a friend and a network of someone that gives you a place to stay for free. That's awesome.
Chicago ain't cheap, so yeah, it's awesome.
No, but see, now you're qualifying it. And I'm going to call you out on that. Don't qualify it with the statement of material. It is pretty awesome that you are going to be out being able to talk to people about your book in a city that's hundreds of miles from where you are, and you know pretty much nobody. And you can get out there, and now there's going to be a pocket of other people who are going to know Aaron O'Neill, and maybe 5 more people that are going to have bought your book, right? I don't know the numbers that you're going to sell. You probably sell many more than that, but I'm just saying that's pretty awesome. So don't miss out on seeing the big picture of what you're in the middle of, and you know what you're enjoying. And Lily, as you go through and look at those colleges, and you look at your goal right now is to kind of zero in on what's important, right?
Mm-hmm.
Keep your grades where they are, so you keep your choices open. And in some ways, you're already successful because you're making decisions and doing analysis that there's so many people in the world that are not in a position to do that analysis. Because their list of colleges that they can go to is narrowed down to the 2 local community colleges that are right down the street. Right? And
yeah.
So when it comes to success, the fact that you have choices means you're already successful. but success is fleeting. Success moves with us. It changes as we go, right? And for me, I learn every day. What I used to think was successful is not even close to being important to me anymore. And I'm right now learning what is important. And every time I learn what's important, it changes me and how I act. And so for me, the success is my evolution and the transformation that I'm in the middle of going through. And my victory and my success right now is in increasing my own self-awareness. It's got nothing to do with finances. It's got nothing to do with raising my kids. It's got nothing to do with anything. The more self-aware I become, the more successful I feel. And then the rest, if I live in the moment and just keep doing what I'm doing, I think is going to take care of itself. And that's what I have to believe. So that's our hour. Lillian, I think you're going to come up with the topic for next week.
Yeah.
All right. Do you have any closing thoughts you want to share with our listeners, or that you want to close with? And then Aaron, I'll ask you for the same, and then we'll pretty much finish it up. But I don't want to be the last one to speak today because I've done a lot of talking.
I think going back to what you said earlier, that success is fleeting and success moves with us. And even though it continues to change as we grow, I don't think you should discredit the small successes that you accomplish when you're younger just because it changed completely when you were older, because at the time your definition of success was completely different. So you were actually being successful in what you thought was success itself. So I don't think you should discredit things that happened when they were, even the small, even the tiniest things. I don't think you should ignore them.
However proud they made you feel in that moment, that pride you should carry to that same level throughout your life.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the stories that sticks with me is one of the craziest out-of-body experiences that I've ever had was in Hong Kong, looking up at the Tiantan Buddha. And I write about it in my book. And it was this moment where, for some reason, I was overwhelmed with every single "I love you" and every single "I'm proud of you" that came from other people. And I started feeling like I could see myself from someone else's eyes, and I was so proud of myself and I loved myself, but it was also humbling at the same time because I realized how hard I had tried and how much I had accomplished to get to where I was in that moment. And I think that that's something that I aspire to ground myself in every day is if you can't gauge your own success, try stepping out of yourself and looking at yourself from someone else's perspective, maybe someone that you have a conversation with or someone who told you outright that they're proud of you, and reflect on that and how it makes you feel, because we are our own worst critics constantly, and we always feel like we could do better, we could be more, we could have more. And in all reality, like you mentioned earlier, the fact that you got out of bed this morning is successful. The fact that you have a roof over your head is successful. And so we need to humble ourselves and look at those small moments in our life that are successful to someone else, and stop measuring that on our own idea of what we should or could be.
Yeah, I think the only thing I'll add, because that's beautiful. I mean, we all have, human nature is to qualify our own successes. And, I kind of jumped on you a little bit. I felt bad in the moment, but don't ever qualify the successes that you have. Don't ever qualify those small things. To your point, Lily, and I think that's very eloquent by you. When I had a crying 16-year-old about a broken heart from a boyfriend, I would say to them, look, the emotions you feel right now at being heartbroken are more intense than they'll ever be when you're in your 20s and you had a breakup. But yet this breakup is not the end of the world. So it's kind of this dichotomy of, it's intense, but in the scheme of things, it's not as critical as you feel it is right now. To your point, Lily, those feelings of success are intense in that moment and you want to embrace them, but don't ever get, and same with the failures, but don't ever get so caught up in either one that you don't move on to the next day and its potential. Thank you all for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the session. This is a podcast on success and what it means to you. And I'm looking forward to our next recording.